Alright, another episode of Forge Diaries. I just wanted to show this second anvil that I've made. There's my first anvil that I've shown in other videos already, and the pedestal for it. And here you can see my second one. I've made the pedestal for this one taller because it's important for the working surface of your anvil to be just below the height of your hips, the height of like the mid-pelvis. And that's so that when you're hammering you can get just the right leverage on it, and you don't strain your arm too much. Anyway, so this pedestal is a little higher so that the working surface of this anvil will be the same height as the working surface of that anvil. Anyway, I haven't done too much with this piece of metal. I found this at Tucson Iron in their scrap section. They just have a scrap metal place where they sell just junk metal. People come in and sell scrap to them, and they keep it in a pile there. And they sell their scrap for, I think, 40 cents a pound. So this is a 153-pound piece of steel, and I bought it for about 60 bucks. So think about that. A brand new 150-pound anvil is going to cost between $700 and $1,000. I got this for 60 bucks. And there are reasons. Now I'm going to describe really quickly what I've done with this, and then I'll talk about why I like it. I haven't done much. It had a little burr, just barely perceptible burr that I could feel as I ran my fingers around the edge. And so I took a hand file and very carefully just removed that burr around the edge, so it's nice and smooth. I won't scratch myself or catch my clothes on it. And importantly, if I'm working with my work near the edge of the anvil, it won't leave any marks in my work. So I wouldn't call this rounded exactly, but I just smoothed that burr off and made sure that it's a nice smooth surface. I also placed 4 bolts right at the edge of it, and that's because while it's so extremely heavy, and this is really solid, it takes quite a bit of effort on my part to move it anywhere at all. I found that after a half hour of pounding, it had shifted about an inch or so. So to keep it centered, I've put these little bolts into the wood around it. And so that just keeps it perfectly centered so that it can't shift or dance or move around on top of the pedestal. So that's it. I've used it. It works very, very well. What is it good for? Why do I like it? Well, here's my previous anvil, and I'm going to continue to use it. I still like it, but here, what's the problem with it? As I'm working, hammering this out and trying to flatten it and such, it's just this part right here, from here to here, is the working surface. It's like, what, a few inches, maybe 6 inches by 3 inches or something. And it makes it kind of tough to make sure things are perfectly flat. It's easy to get things with a slight bend or curve or whatever, and this surface is not long enough to really ensure that something is perfectly flat. Okay, whereas this thing has a very large and extremely, so I'm going to show you the surface on this is absolutely laser flat. And so this makes a really excellent surface for using as an anvil for long objects like blades. So I've used it today, and I used it to flatten out this thing. It's still got a little, it's not perfectly flat, but it's really close. Anyway, I got a little bit more work to do on this. It's really easy to use this to get things flat. So I recommend you get on the internet and get on knife forums, and people say, well, what can I use as an anvil? What can I use as an anvil? Go to your local scrapyard about once a week. Drop by your local steel scrapyard and look for big heavy chunks of metal. There were 4 of these at Tucson Iron, 153 pounds apiece, absolutely laser flat. So in plenty of ways, for somebody who's making swords or knives, this is a better anvil than a traditional anvil because the surface is so big. It does have some, you would have to work on it a little bit if you were trying to make it into a true anvil. For example, this anvil has this hardy hole, which is this square hole here, and it makes it so that you can take tools like my spring tool that I made and insert them into that, and they'll stay on the top of this. Well, you could certainly do that with this. Obviously, almost nobody has the ability to drill a hole in 3 inches of steel, but you could take a piece of square pipe and you could cut a 3-inch piece of it and weld it onto the side of this right here, and then you could insert your, you could get a piece of pipe that was just that big, and then, you could insert that in the piece of square pipe, and you could build your instrument so that the working end of your spring tools is more toward the center or whatever. But by welding a little piece of square pipe on the side of that, you could make a perfectly functional hardy hole out of it, and then this would be even more useful. But I found it. It was cheap, so I have 2 anvils. I have this one. This is a farrier's anvil, which is kind of small. But, the anvils that Japanese swordsmiths use are just big square pieces of metal. They don't have a horn, they don't have hardy holes, they don't have any of this stuff. And this is, similar in concept. It's just a big, heavy, flat piece of metal, but for virtually the entire process, in fact, if we're not using the spring tool, this just heavy, flat piece of metal would be ideal for the entire process. There's nothing you need to do in forging Japanese blades that requires a horn or the other parts of a Western style anvil. So this is perfect for my purposes. Anyway, this is my most recent piece I'm working on. I'm just working on forging the geometry of a shinogi zukuri blade. You can see that I flattened out the ko shinogi just a little bit in through here, but it's still pretty robust, and I think I can correct that pretty easily. I'm working on, so you can see the shinogi line that runs down the length of it. That's this crest that runs down the side here. I'm working on the handle part of it, making it distinct from the rest of the blade. It should have a continuation of the shinogi line. None of this is perfect at this point. I've got more forging left to do on this. And even after I've done the additional forging, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm getting pretty close. You can see I'm getting fairly close to developing the geometry of a shinogi zukuri. I think probably a couple more weeks of practice and I'm going to start on my first katana. This is just a scrap piece of metal that I'm hammering on while I learn the geometry of a shinogi zukuri. Anyway, this is relatively close. We're getting there. All right, there you go. That's my new anvil, and that's my current piece of practice metal there that I'm working on.